Week 4, day 2, we got some progress on Netflix yesterday, kind of a different pace to class with questions and seeing examples and all of that. Who wants to kick us off with stand up? What did we do yesterday? What did we learn? What were our wins? What were the frustrations? How are we feeling?
I
Not
like
all
how.
at once. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Shanti.
Oh, I was just going to say that breaking down the page, not just with the boxes, but then doing the Google Doc afterwards, really helped me see it for me personally. So I just
Awesome.
like that.
Yeah, and those little tools can be a game changer, right? Because for me, it's that's how I think. That is how I've been thinking for the past 10 years. And so it's very easy for me to look at the outline and go, oh, call, and div goes in this div and go from there. But those little tools can be instrumental in breaking it down and saying, well, I need a little bit more help, right? I understand where all of those boxes are, but now I get into my code and how do I understand where those divs are, where those divs get nested together, right? And so kind of relying on tools that you've already used, like an outline, like, bulleting things down and saying, oh, well, if this is a sub bullet, I understand it's about the parent thing, right? And so translating that into a tech concept or an engineering concept, now all of a sudden it's not just a bunch of divs, all lined up and nested together. It's something that makes sense of, oh, this column is related to this row, so that's why it makes sense to be indented at that level. So I'm glad that was a helpful tool. We will have at least one more project, if not two, coming up in front end. And so we'll continue using that tool. But if at any point you're working on your homework or you're working on a new project or whatever it is, never be afraid to take that step, even if we aren't doing it in class. If you find that helpful, go through it. Will only take you a couple minutes, but it may solve a lot of problems for you. And the same is true in reverse, right? Sometimes you get this code and you're like, I don't know what this is doing. This is 1,000 lines of a web page, and I don't understand all the moving pieces. Sometimes it's helpful to reverse engineer it, right? Even though it's all laid out, going back in, doing that outline yourself can help you understand and navigate the existing code. So glad that outline was helpful. What else from yesterday? What did we learn? What were light bulb moments? I think, Larry, you had a comment.
Yeah, I was gonna say the outline, but Shantina brought that up. But an add-on to that is I thought about, can we make the bullets checklist boxes, check boxes, and I actually was able to do that. So now, they're indented under each place, and I can check them off one by one as I work through them.
That's an awesome tip. How did you do checkboxes in Google Docs?
Now you want to make me tell a lie. Let me see. I'll figure it out on my other computer.
Yeah, one thing I know that you can do is, we've used our emoji trick a couple times, and instead of going out and getting the icons, we can just dump an emoji in. I have done something similar where I've just said, I've put a red X there, the red emoji X when it's not done, and then I delete out the red emoji X and put the green checkbox instead. And that can be a good way of tracking progress. It is totally possible that Google Docs has checkboxes built into it. I'm just not aware of how to do it.
So when you highlight the stuff, go to format, then bullets and numbering, and then checklist will be in the list options for how the bullets show up. If you go to format,
format, bullets, checklist,
numbering, and then there's a checklist. So when you click on the checklist, it'll make check boxes. So I just highlighted all of the stuff that was bulleted, clicked on checklist, and it made things check boxes. And then I just made sure I indented them, like increased the indentation when I needed to.
Awesome. Grid outline. Let me pop that open. So what Larry is suggesting is I'm just going to test it on these 4. If you go to format up at the top, go down to bullets and numbering and turn it into a checklist instead. now what you're able to do is just check them off as you work on them, and you can track your progress. And this I think would be also super helpful to go through and say, you know what, let me get all of my rows done first. Let me make sure that all of my page content is structured, right? So you could go through and you could check these off, and then you go back up to the top and say, okay, let me work on my Netflix logo. Okay, now let me work on my category links. And I think this is super helpful, not only for tracking as you get things done and having that psychological response of, all right, I'm making progress, I'm getting there, but also recognizing that you're probably not going to do this entire project in a day, right? So when you come back to this the following day, it would be really helpful to be in here and say, oh, you know what, I created these 2 rows, but I was stuck on getting that offset column. Let me dive back in there. So that's a great tip, Larry. Thank you. I will keep that in mind for the future. I also think it may be beneficial to actually start with it in bullet mode, just so you can see the indentation, make sure you understand that it's at different levels. And then once you get done all of it, then switch it over to checklist mode and start checking them off. So that's a great tip. Anything else from yesterday?
For me, it was just actually seeing how important it is to make sure that I'm doing each bullet and it worked for me to each individual one instead of trying to write it all out and go back and fix it. I think my indentation stayed perfect by just making sure if it didn't look right, fix that and then go on to the next thing instead of trying to power through and further confusing myself. I did get stuck, but I know exactly where I'm stuck at and what I want it to look like to get unstuck.
Absolutely. And that's a really hard thing for me as an instructor to take a step back and be like, no, you have all the knowledge you need. Go forth. I have faith in you. Right. And that's really tough because I was messaging Ariel and Caitlin and Karen and kind of leaning on my support network and trying to figure out, where are you guys at? And I'm like, I know you know the syntax. I know you're there. You just need the practice. Right. And so this project is the first time we kind of take a step back and we go, you got to do this on your own, right? And I think it's really empowering not only to see you guys making progress, but then also being able to get to the end of this project and take a step back, right? Because then there's a reason our project after this is going to be the portfolio site, because you guys are actually making things. And yeah, making a little weather app is cool and you can use emojis and stuff like that. But now this is like Netflix. This is big time. This is, one of the most popular sites on the web, and you can actually build that out. And so that's why we do the portfolio project next, to make sure that we're capturing all of that as you go. So by the time you reach the end of this, the Netflix project is going to be long gone in your rear view mirror, but it's something you've accomplished, right? And that's why we do that portfolio project next, is to make sure that you can show all of that off. So super empowering. Glad that you're having those light bulbs moments, Scotty, and starting to realize that, I can do this and I can stop. And I think that that's a really important thing as well, right? Is that it's easy to dig yourself into a hole when you're following someone else. It's easier to when you're doing self-paced and working on your own code to say, hey, before I move on here, before I try something else, I really need to make sure that all of this is functional. And there is definitely a binary moment, right? You don't get indentation, you're fighting with the syntax, you don't understand how anyone can do this. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I can write HTML code as easily as Max can, right? And it's this really odd moment of, I didn't think I would ever get it, and now all of a sudden I get it, and I don't know what I did, but it's all working. And so that's I'm glad to hear that some of you are hitting that point. We do have one more project coming up to make sure you get there. And then HTML goes away for a couple weeks and you get to think that that's behind you. And then all of a sudden, bam, it comes back with React. And sometimes it doesn't click until then. Sometimes you put this behind you, you think you're done with syntax issues, and then React comes back, and sometimes that's the pivotal moment. I know Ariel mentioned yesterday, she was fighting with syntax. She didn't think she was going to get it. And then React came along, and that's when it made sense. So the good news is we do change it up coming up. You only have another week and a half of HTML and CSS directly. I actually laid all of that out. So I just want to give you guys a quick rundown of that. But before we dive into there, anything that you guys are stuck on, anything that you would like me to review or come up with an example, any concepts that you might not be getting or you hear me saying and it's just not making sense?
The dev tools is I'm still having an issue with that. I know how to use parts of it, but I like tried looking at YouTube and this didn't really work that great for me.
So I was up all night last night. Every time I try to go to sleep, I couldn't. I actually had some light bulb moments. So yeah, well, when we get there, we get there.
Awesome. Larry, DevTools is one of those really hard things. I couldn't tell you what percentage of DevTools I don't know, because there is so much in DevTools that, it's easy to get overwhelmed, right? So the most important thing in DevTools is using that little inspect button and hovering over your divs and seeing kind of how the browser is understanding where your divs are, right? And the kind of important concept there, I think, is that the code is much easier for the computer to understand than the human mind to understand, right? So going in there and saying, hey, we've got a lot of different lines of code. I care about this div in particular. Show me the information on this div. Show me what the margin is. Show me why it's getting pushed down. Show me why I'm applying the CSS and it's not working, right? So DevTools is one of those hard things where it's like, I would not claim to be an expert in DevTools, right? I know enough DevTools to get by. And I think that is DevTools in particular are one of those things where you never fully grasp it, but you find yourself reaching for it more and more. And that's when it becomes helpful. So the good news is DevTools don't go away, and you will continue to get exposure to it throughout the entire curriculum. So I think that's one of those concepts where, like, I'm glad you're identifying it as, hey, this is something that I want to learn more on. But at the same time, I think that's one in particular that just like syntax, right? It's just going to take time and practice using it. I will put one caveat on that of, if you see me using DevTools and you don't understand why I'm using the DevTools or what I'm clicking on in the DevTools or how I even knew to open the DevTools, that's when I would, throw your hand up or interrupt me and go, whoa, slow down. Explain that to me, right? Why did you go into the DevTools? What are you clicking on in there? And I think that's probably the best way to get exposure to it.
Thank you.
No problem.
Hey, Max, can you? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
It's all right. I'm sorry. Max, I got stuck on my icons not popping up on my web page.
Okay.
Maybe you can later on to help me check my code. I thought I pasted the the code for the Google fonts in my CSS, but I don't know why. I was Googling stuff trying to figure it out.
Yeah. Did you remember to take -outlined out of the class name?
Oh, let me try that real quick then. All right.
See if that does it. If it does, hopefully that's an easy fix. If not, definitely remind me when we get into the Netflix project again, and we'll circle back and give that a try.
Okay, thanks.
Anyone else suck on using Google Fonts? I can do a quick refresher on that. Okay. So we will throw that at the end. We'll go over how to use a Google font again, and how to use the Google material icons and make sure those are working. That's probably a good thing to review. Actually, should really have a notebook next to me and don't. So let me just throw that in.
I'm glad I waited, because I was going to abandon Google Font and use this whole other something about awesome, but
Font Awesome. You found
right.
my
I was
other
gonna
one.
abandon Google and go with that, and then I was like, let me wait until we go back to class. And also the assignment that you gave us about the with those four
Flexbox
things, I
or
tried
media?
to submit it, but it kept giving me an error.
So that was my fault. As of about I don't know, around noon, I think I fixed that.
Oh, okay. It was last night. Okay.
I told you to
9:52 a.m.
unhand that, Max.
Yes, thank you for calling me out on that. That was totally an omission on my part. We made it to assignment 21 without any issues, so I'm going to count that as a win for me. That should be fixed now. No big deal if you turn it in late. But that does bring up a good point. So what I would like to do is we are going to turn in what we call a WIP, or a work in progress, for whatever you have for Netflix at the end of the night. If you are done at the end of the night and you're feeling great, you can turn it in for both assignment number 20 and 22. If you are still working on it, you got more stuff to do, that's okay. Go ahead and turn it in for assignment 20. Assignment 20 is just going to give me a chance tomorrow to go through all of your code and figure out kind of where the class is as a collective, right? Whatever you've got at 8:30 tonight, go ahead and submit it. You're not going to lose any points. I think everyone's going to get a 2 on that assignment. That's just for me to understand, hey, going into this portfolio project tomorrow, what are concepts we need to touch on again? What's the pace of the class? Kind of doing a live adjustment there. With that said, keep working on it. If you don't have it finished, Sunday at 11:59, go ahead and resubmit it under assignment 22. And that will give me a chance to make sure that you're all caught up, make sure we're going into the next class. So assignment 22 is what's going to get your actual final grade for the assignment. Assignment 20 is what you should just turn in at the end of the evening, unless you have them both done, unless you have it done by the end of the evening, and then you can submit it for both. Does that
Actually,
make...
mine's kind of low.
Oh, okay.
And I got mine all the way up. So
Let's try that. Is that any better?
try again.
Testing 1, 2, 3.
It might be.
Can everyone else hear me? Or is it lower than normal?
It's a little lower than normal.
Okay. Let's try another adjustment.
See if you,
You did seem to get a little louder with your first adjustment.
Let's see.
Is your speakers though?
Yeah,
It-
like
it-
I can hear you good, Wayne, but I can hear him, but it's not. It's like lower.
It's very fainted, huh?
Give me 1 second. Is that any better? That's better? Not really? Okay, hold on. Give me 1
A
second.
little, yeah.
I'm going to swap it out I got some new equipment today, and it's obviously not as good as the other ones.
That's actually better. You sound a little bit
better.
Okay.
First, you sound better.
We'll try it here, and if that's causing any problems, let me know, and I'll swap it out. Okay. So, where are we going from here? Let's share the outline. Any other
Max?
comments or questions? Yeah.
Before you get too far, can you go over span and maybe explain class versus ID again?
Yes.
Like briefly tonight, please. Thank you.
So, Div Verse
Please
Span.
just bang that into my head because I keep like getting them confused and I keep like trying to remember it.
Okay. Anything else to pop onto the outline for tonight? Okie doke. Okay, so let's dive in here. I'm going to share my screen. So tonight, just to recap to make sure I didn't forget anything, we'll do a quick div verse span. We'll do a quick class verse ID. We will do an example of a media query, which hopefully will tie into last night's free code camp assignment. We are going to go over flex and display, and Larry, that will hopefully explain the questions you were asking about last night of, hey, I've got my nav bar here, but how do I get those things to align? I sent Larry a code sample of that, but I just want to show the different adjustments that you can do to get alignment even more laid out than just a grid alone. We're going to do a quick overview on Google Fonts and material icons. I'm actually going to move those up. And then for the rest of the class, we will focus on getting Netflix over the finish line. Just to recap, whatever you have at the end of the night, send that into assignment 20. Assignment 22 is what you are continuing to work on. Just keep on working on the Netflix site until you have it done. If you do have it done by the end of the night, submit it to both assignments. And if you're looking for some extra resources or where to go next, these are if you finish early, these should be the same ones as yesterday. The Free Code Camp Flexbox, the Flexbox Froggy, which is a great little exercise to practice moving things around and making sure you're understanding the alignment, and the CSS grid section in Free Code Camp. No big deal. If you don't do these, there's no assignment, there's no extra credit. But this is kind of, if you are feeling like front end is where you're going in your career and you're really enjoying it, having a deeper understanding of those three concepts is probably the next place to head. Ariel just threw out in chat, Flexbox Froggy helped her a lot in the last cohort. We're going to touch a little bit on the deflex property that Bootstrap provides. That is kind of a layer of tools or utilities to understand Flexbox and get that moving. But if you really want to understand the layout of Flexbox Grid of Flexbox and of CSS Grid and dive in and really understand how the computer is laying things out, all three of those additional resources are super helpful. And if you get stuck at any point of them along the way, please let me know, and we can either talk about them during one-on-one or I can answer your questions asynchronously in Slack. With all of that said, last chance for any questions before I dive into code. Okay. So what I'm going to do, we're going to come back. Larry's code is actually the perfect example for some of the other exercise, but I'm going to create a file called playground.html, and I'm also going to create a file called playground.css. You do not have to follow along with me unless you would really like to. This is mainly a concept review, so if at any point jump in, interrupt me if something isn't clicking, if something isn't making sense. But you do not have to follow along unless you would really like to. So in my playground.html, I'm going to do my exclamation point enter, and that's going to drop in my default template for me to get my HTML started. I'm going to call this playground. And like I said, anytime I start any new code, I want to make sure everything is working right out of the gate, because it's so easy to have our CSS get 30 lines into it and then realize, hey, none of the CSS is applying. So first thing I always do, I add an H1, I add in any text in there, and then I go to my head tag, I add a link, I tell it the rel type is going to be a style sheet, and the href for it is going to be playground.css. Then I go to my playground.css, I add an h1 tag, I make the color, let's go different today and go purple instead of red. I am going to go to go live, and there's my purple h1. So that right out of the gate is making progress. Let's go back to our outline. First thing we said we need to cover is div verse span, right? So let's say I have a sentence. So this is a div is a division in our site, right? So whenever we have something that's kind of logically grouped together that we want to style, we're going to put it in a div. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to say this word should be in bold. Okay, well, I want the word to show up in bold. So if I go over to my browser, blow this up, I just have this text here. And text is usually in a p tag, right? So let me move all of it in there. P tag for paragraph. Okay, it's showing up there, great, no problem. But I want to get this word to be bold. Well, if we put the word in another div, what we're going to do is move it down into its own section, its own division of the site. Well, we don't really want that, right? Divs by default are block elements, and that block is spanning 100% of the screen. So we can visualize that by going into the inspect tool and hovering over the word, and you see that blue box that appears around it. That's trying to tell us, hey, the browser is seeing this one big block, and divs by default take up the whole block of the website. They take up the entire width that's available to them. So we don't really want that. We don't want a block element with 100%. We would like an inline element. And an inline element you can think about as literally it's inline, right? So if you put a picture inline, you could imagine that picture between the two pieces of text. The same for that word. We want a span element because it's literally, we just want to target that piece in the line of the text. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to swap this out to a span, and now it goes back to normal, right? It goes back to displaying it in line. But now what that allowed us to do is put an ID on there that says bold. So now when we go in back to our CSS, we can target the bold ID and say font weight should be bold. Now we've got that bold. Now the flip side of that is divs, right? So let's say we've got some text down at the bottom that we would like really spaced out. Well, we're not going to use a span element for that because it's going to be a whole block of text that we may want to style differently. Say we want to put a border around it. Well, if we go into our playground, we can add now a div down here and say this entire block of text has a border. We can do a div here. We can say ID is border. And now in our CSS, we can add our border and say border 5px. Let's use the dash border and make it fuchsia color. Let's make it fuchsia. Let's get fancy.
Fuchsia.
Okay, and so what we see, Ariel, I know you are blinded by that border, but you can see that that border is going around the entire div or the entire block that that div is taking up. So basically what we're using there is whenever we would like our elements to be in line right next to each other, you know, keep on going left to right, that's when we're going to use our span. And sometimes we would like to be able to individually target those words. So that's why we're going to add multiple spans next to each other to be able to get them in a group. But if we're thinking about a div and we're pushing things down on the page, that's when we're going to use a div, except for the one exception to that is a column, right? Whenever we have columns, what that call class is going to do is start pushing things over and lining them up based off of the column layout. Any questions on that before we move on? We understand when we would use a span and when we would use a div.
Which one is it when we go to the style sheets and it's dot something and we use a dot instead of a hashtag?
That's coming up next.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll wait. I'll be patient. I'm sorry.
No. Good question. Any other questions on div verse span in particular? Or any kind of HTML element, right? You can see we kind of mixed these, and I had an H1 up here. Now, if I needed to, and I needed, let's say for whatever reason, I did a div, I'm going to call it ID equals pretty colors. And now, if I move my H1 in there and say, I would like everything in my pretty colors to be purple. Well, I'm going to add another thing in here that says this should be purple too. Okay, so it's black because our H1 is the only thing targeted as purple. So what I could do is I could add another ID to this and target both the H1 and the P tag, or I could take my pretty colors and say, hey, anything inside my pretty colors ID is going to be purple. And now that section of the site, whatever is going to be inside this div tag, whether it's the H1 or the P tag, because it's all text, it's going to be purple. Okay, any questions about that before we go into class versus ID?
A question. When you have two things that are divs and you want them to still display side by side.
Two ways of, well, more than two ways of doing it. If you are using the row and column system, they will display side by side because rows always flow columns, that way. You can override that. If you wanted to say, hey, I would really like this H1 and the P to be next to each other. Well, if we hover over it, we see our P tag is a block element taking the whole thing, and the purple is taking up the whole thing. We can override that. And the way we can do that is if we click on this H1, I'm going to use my dev tools just to show that we can play around in here. So I'm going to select my H1, and over in this element.style, I'm going to say, hey, display this as inline. So what that's going to do is it's going to make our margin no longer apply because inline elements and vertical margin don't apply top and bottom. So what that did is it put it inline, and you see it shrunk it up. But this P tag is still not right to the next of it because this P tag is still displaying as a block element. It's still taking up the full width. So if we wanted that to show up to the left of our hello world, we could override that display property as well and say show that as inline, and now we have them side by side. So just because a div or a P tag or an H1 by default is a block element doesn't necessarily mean that all of them are that they have to be permanently block elements. We can override them and use that display property instead.
Can you hover over that so I can see how it looks within?
There's the H1 and there's the P tag.
Okay.
Thank you.
Light bulb moment.
Awesome. I don't know who said light bulb moment, but I'm glad we're turning them on. And of course, we could use our div class row and our columns if we wanted to lay it out that way.
That was going to be my question. So we only need to specify row when we're going to be putting columns in.
Correct.
Okay.
Because by default, a div is going to take up the full width, and that would be our row essentially. Okay. So let's dive into IDs and classes. So we've got our H1 here, our hello world. This should be purple too. But I'm going to come down here, add in one more div, and say, let's add a P tag that says the last bit of purple on the page. Well, I could take my ID, copy that, copy, not cut, and put that on my ID down here, and we do have a last bit of purple spelled wrong. We do have that here, but now we are breaking an HTML rule. And there are actually HTML validators that will go through all of your HTML and kind of shake its finger at you and say, no, you can't do this. This is not valid HTML. The reason this is not valid HTML is because we reused an ID. IDs by definition should be unique, right? They are identification. So if we have two things that are sharing the same identification, we don't know which one is which. And so the browser, it isn't happy about it, but it understood, hey, that ID matches up in two different places. So we're still going to apply it, but we're not happy about it. So what we're going to do instead is change this to a class. So instead of ID equals, we are going to say class equals, but now our purple is completely gone. And that's because our CSS is looking for this pound sign. The pound sign always matches an ID. But when we use the period, now it knows, hey, the period means we're looking for class equals pretty color somewhere. So now when we come back over here, this should be purple. And so this is now valid CSS because we've got our class pretty colors in 2 different places. So it's applying that over here. So whenever we are using an ID, like we're using an ID bold here, because that's an ID, it's going to be the $. And when it's going to be a class, like pretty colors, that's when we're going to use the period. Now you may say, Max, what's the point? Why don't I just use classes everywhere? And the answer to that is, believe it or not, some people do. But when we get into our JavaScript is set up to return multiple things if we are trying to find classes on the page. But if we use an ID, it is set up to return only one thing, to match to only that one thing. So that's something that you need to be thinking about, right? Hey, I'm putting a logo on my page, and this is the only place the logo shows up. So I'm going to go ahead and use an ID for that. But I've got a profile icon, and that profile icon may show up next to any place that I make a comment. Well, if that's going to show up multiple places on the page and show my profile every place I leave a comment, that shouldn't be an ID. That should be a class, because I would like that class to appear at multiple pages, at multiple spots along the page. So it isn't, it's not like your browser is going to explode into flames if you reuse an ID, and it's not like it's going to, cry sobbing if you use a class only once. But the general line of thinking there is, if it is something unique and I'm trying to target that one specific thing, I want to use an ID. And if it is not unique, if this is something that I know I'm going to reuse, bold would be a good example, right? Throughout the page, I know I'm going to want to make multiple things bold. So this probably shouldn't be an ID. This should be a class, because I'm going to want to reuse it later on. Any questions on that? Okie doke. Moving on. Class ID we did. Google Fonts. Let's dive into that. So I'm going to go to fonts.google.com. And the problem with the internet is that there are only about 12 web-safe fonts that we are allowed to use without telling the browser, hey, here's this font file. So if we actually do a Google search for web-safe fonts, this is the list of all the fonts that you are allowed to use. And if you don't use one of these, there is a chance that the end user, the person who's loading your website, will not have that specific font that you're using on their computer. And so the browser won't know which one to use and will either use a fallback or the default for the browser. So if you pick any of these, what are they, 10 there, maybe a couple more, the browser is guaranteed to know what these fonts are and will show it up fine. So what we can do is we can say, hey, I want my font to look like it's coming out from a typewriter. So I can go to my playground.css. I can say, hey, all of my H1s should use a font family of Courier New. And when I come over to my playground, that shows up fine. But the other thing that we have is Google Fonts. And what Google Fonts has said is it should be easier for developers to use pretty fonts. And so what they do is they provide all of these fonts available to us that we can use. But before we can use them, we've got to tell the browser, hey, go to Google and pull the font from Google. So if we click on Square Peg here, what I'm going to do... I don't want to download the family. Oh, here it is. There's this select this style button. So I'm going to click on select this style and click on the view selected families up here and clear out a font that I already had. So here's Square Peg, right? This is the one that we're playing around with. So what they do is they provide us a couple link tags, just like we've seen with Bootstrap and Material Icons. What they're basically doing is saying, hey, throw this in your head tag, and if it's in the head tag, you're telling the browser whenever it loads your page, go get some information from Google. So the first two are basically saying, hey, while the page is loading, go do a pre-connection, go get something established with Google so that when we do go pull in those fonts, we're going to be able to access them quicker. So the first one is going to fonts.googleapis.com. The second one is going to fonts.gstatic.com. That's using a CDN or a content delivery network. You don't have to worry too much about them. Just know that these first two link tags, if the browser supports it, are making your font files load quicker because it's opening a connection before we actually pull in the font itself. If you don't understand that, that's completely fine, no problem. But down here, this is where it matters. This is where it's actually pulling in our font square peg. So I'm going to copy all three of these. I'm going to go to my head tag. I want to put it above my link tag because I want these fonts to load so that by the time it gets to my style sheet, it has them loaded in and understands what fonts we're talking about. So I'm going to paste them in. I'm going to fix my indentation like always, and I'm going to save, come back over to my playground, and nothing has changed. And that's because we just told the browser, hey, in the head, when you're loading everything up and finding my style sheets, go make sure that you understand what the font square peg is. But we haven't told the browser, hey, this is what I would like to show up in the font square peg. So what we're going to do is we're going to come back down here, and that's what this font family is doing. That's what we are saying, hey, use this font square peg, and if you don't have square peg, go find some cursive font on the system somewhere and use that instead. So I'm going to copy that. I'm going to go back to my playground, and I'm going to replace my courier new with my font family square peg. So I'm going to come back to my playground, and now I've got my hello world showing up in that square peg font. Now, the next good question is, well, you said this is a fallback. What happens if you forget this step? So I'm going to comment it out, so the browser's going to ignore it. What the browser is going to do is fall back to the default cursive font, the web-safe font that all browsers have, and it's going to make it show up like that instead. So I can take that out. I'm going to comment that back in so we get our pretty font. And you may say, I want to use that font across the whole website. I don't want to target each individual element. I would like all of the text to look like that. Okay, no problem. We're going to go back to our playground.css. And instead of targeting the H1, we are going to target the body element, because the body element contains our divs, it contains our p tag, it contains everything. So the body element is our trick, but just like our IDs where we use our hashtag and our classes where we use our period, when it's a native HTML element that we're targeting, we don't use a period or a hashtag. We just say, hey, go target anything in the body. And now you will see our entire page is updated to use that font. Yes. You're unmuted.
Way
Go
you
ahead.
use body. Could we do that with span?
Absolutely. You can do it with any HTML element. So if I change this to a span, now only words in my span are going to use that font.
Okay.
Now, if we put a period or a hashtag in front of that, now you're saying look for any element anywhere with a class of span on it. Well, we don't have any class equals span, so that's why this isn't getting applied to anything. But we can totally put that back to a span or a body or whatever you want there, and that will update it.
Do we have to keep the default as it is in order for it to work in the style sheets where it says cursive, or can we make that anything?
So that should be cursive, sans serif, or serif. And what that's going to do is I'll show you what the defaults are. So if I take out my link tag again, and the reason you mainly want to do this is if your site loads and for whatever reason Google Fonts goes down, you still want, a font to show up. And so by default, this is the default cursive font. If we do a serif font, this is the default serif font, which is, I think, Times New Roman. And then the default sans serif font is a little bit more like Arial. The difference between serif and sans serif is you see the little hanging parts of the letter. So the R has the base at the bottom of it. That's the difference between a serif font and a sans serif font. But what you could do is you could go to the website fonts and say, yes, I want a sans serif font to show up, which is, I believe that's Arial. Let's see. Computed font family. Is it going to tell me what the sans serif? Okay, rendered fonts Helvetica. So the default font is Helvetica, but if you wanted to, you could say, hey, I want my font to be Georgia. And if you don't have Georgia, then fall back to whatever sans serif you have. At which point it's going to change to that, unless for whatever reason Georgia isn't available, and then it will go to sans serif.
Thank you.
Hey Max, what did you what command or what quick command did you use to add those comments into your CSS?
Comments here.
Like you did, you highlighted it and
Highlight
then
it, command slash.
Oh, okay.
And that will comment out either whatever lines are highlighted, or the line that your cursor is on if there aren't multiple ones highlighted. And that works in reverse as well. So because I have these highlighted, if I highlight them again and if I highlight all of these again and hit command slash, it will uncomment it as well. And that is a great tip, not only for leaving comments, like if you have a blank line and you say add a comment here and hit command slash, it will convert it to a comment for you. But commenting out is just as often used for getting code not to run as it is for leaving English comments for the next user. And that is language specific. So in HTML, we use our arrow and our 2 dashes with the exclamation mark, and then 2 dashes and the arrow again to end the comment. In CSS, if we hit command slash, we either use a slash and a star, or we can do, no, we can't. Different language for that. So in CSS, it's a slash and a star, and then a star and a slash to end it. When we get into JavaScript, there are multiple different kinds of comments we can leave. So we'll touch on that at some point, or Free Code Camp will. Okay. Keep on going there. If you don't have the chat open, Ariel is leaving some notes in there, either about how she thinks about it for a different perspective, or just recapping what I'm going over. So if you don't have the chat open, I know how much you all love having 40 different windows open. So go ahead and pop open that chat for the 41st window, just to give you a little bit more to juggle. Mostly joking. She is adding more commentary in, which is helpful. I'm keeping my eye on it. And Ariel totally knows I'll call her out if it's not good advice, but good advice so far. So feel free to pop that open and catch up on that as well. Okay, let's go on to the next thing we wanted to cover, which is we did our Google fonts. We got that working. What about the Google material icons? Well, we know that we can use emoji, but emoji sometimes isn't going to capture everything that we want, right? We may want a profile icon to show up, and there's a difference between a profile icon and a cartoon picture of like a family or whatever, right? So Font Awesome is the icon resource that I have reached for years. It's what I use in all of my work projects. But Google Material Icons is a great alternative, and it is a little bit easier to get working. Font Awesome has a little bit more overhead, so it's harder to set up, but I like both of them. Whatever you pick is fine. We're going to go over Material Icons. So I'm back at fonts.google.com, and I'm going to click on my icons up at the top. So if I do a search for, I don't know, do they have a sun? They have lots of suns. I am only a couple blocks from the beach, so I am going to click Beach Access. And this is the icon that I would like to use. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here, copy my span class, come back over, and I'm going to put it right there. I'm going to fix my indentation. I'm going to take out the word dash outlined, because for some reason the outline font is not the one they use by default. I'm going to come back over here, refresh, and I get this ugly beach_access. Well, that's because if we go up to our link tag, even if I comment my square peg font back in, Now it's beach access in a different font, but it's still not the icon that we want showing up. That's because we only told the browser about this font called Square Peg. We also need to tell the browser, hey, go load in this font, and that font is really going to be the icons that we want to show up. So if we go back here and click back on icons, we need to go to the developer guide, and from the developer guide, we scroll down a little bit, and here's this icon font for the web, and here's the link tag we need to get it working. So I'm going to copy, hit the little copy icon there, come back. Now the order doesn't matter here, whether you have your font, your Square Peg font loading in first and then the icons, or vice versa. You do want it underneath these two pre-connect tabs, because the pre-connect is going to make it load in a little bit faster. But it doesn't matter if you put it here or here. You do want it above your CSS file though. And the reason you want to do that is if you want to change the color of that, or play around with the icons or whatever it is, you want your CSS to override whatever CSS is coming in from Google. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. That put in our material icons font family. And so now when we come back to our playground, we get our little beach icon showing up. And this is a span, just like any other span, that just says beach access in there. So if we wanted to, we could add an ID called beach. And in our CSS, we could target our beach hashtag because we're using an ID. And we could make that a font size of 160 pixels because I really like the beach. And now we get a bigger beach icon. And because it's a font according to the browser, even though they're the icons, we can do things like color. Let's make it cyan. And now we've got a blue beach showing up. Okay. That takes care of our div and span, our class and our ID, our Google fonts, and our Google material icons. That should have all been a review, but before we move on to the new stuff, any questions about that?
Can you just show your code one time real
Okay.
quick? I wanted to see how you added that
Yeah,
color.
and let me do a live share in case anyone would like to join. You don't have to, but if you would like to join and pull up the code, you can. Give everyone just a quick minute. If you would like to catch up, otherwise we will keep going. And I'll switch it over to the HTML just so you can see what we were doing over there.
We need a link.
Yes, this link material icons is what we need to add in. Different link?
I mean, to join the live share.
Oh, I put it in the live stream channel in Slack.
Okay. Heard.
If you want to join, we're only gonna do about 10 more minutes in this code, so it's completely fine not to join. My dog is, I don't know how, but she's got an internal timer, and when 6 o'clock rolls around, if there's not food in her bowl, she throws a fit. And so because we're waiting until 7, it's like all of a sudden I hear this whine in the corner, and I'm like, how do you know? I don't understand. How do you know the time?
Okay.
Okay, do we want 1 more minute, or should we keep rolling here? Okay, let's keep rolling. So what we are going to do is we're going to move on to our media queries. Now, hopefully you got some practice with this. I know it was only a couple exercises in free code camp. If you have not done that, I would recommend that you do. But basically what this is saying is sometimes we would like our CSS to only apply to certain screen sizes, right? So I'm looking at my H1 here, and that H1 is fine. But if I would like that H1 to shrink down a little bit, I can say, hey, go target this CSS in this block, and these curly braces should only apply if something is true. So basically what this code is saying, not this code, close some of these out. What this is saying is if my screen is 600 pixels or below, right? So it's basically saying the max that this is going to apply to is 600 pixels, and whatever is in here is going to apply. But whenever my screen width gets above 600, ignore any of the CSS in here. So we can do all kinds of stuff with that. We can say, hey, we're going to add in a media query, and we're going to say only apply this when the screen max width is, let's say, 400 pixels. I'm going to say 500. We're going to touch on these in just 1 second, what our other options are there. So in here, what is jumping up? Why? I didn't open mail. Quit, go away. Sorry, I don't know how I did that. Okay, I'm going to target my H1. And in my H1, I am going to say my font size should be nice and tiny on screen widths up to 500 pixels. But as soon as we get over 500 pixels, make it whatever the default size is, or make sure whatever's up here applies. So I'm going to go to my playground. Here's my hello world. But as I start dragging it down, it got tiny. So one thing I will note is when you have your DevTools open, you see up here in the top right, it only shows up for a second. But what that's doing is it's actually showing you the width of your window right now. So if we drag that down, the width of this window is 250 pixels right now. But as we drag that up, if you notice, as soon as we hit the 500, all of a sudden my hello world gets bigger. And that is not only just for font size, which is a common use case. We could say something like display none. We want this to hide on tiny little screen sizes. But as soon as we get above 500, now this display none no longer applies, and it's going to show up. So I'm going to go up, and there's my hello world. And as soon as I hit 500, it disappears. And I bring it back over 500, and it reappears. So that's how we can use our media query to get that showing or hiding or applying any of our CSS. And we could actually do that in steps, right? We could say, hey, if it's below 500, make the font size 12. And then if our media query and max width is 700, then target our H1 still and make the font size let's say 28 pixels. So now we go down and we get nice and tiny on our hello world. We come up above 500 and we get our font size of 28. And then if we keep going bigger, we get a slightly bigger font size there. That was probably a bad example. Let me bump that down to 20 so we can see the difference. Okay, so there's our 700. There is our between 500 and 700. And then we go down to our 500 and it gets a little smaller. So we can stack these on top of each other. But I will say be careful and make sure that your lower numbers are towards the bottom. Because otherwise, this max width is saying anything up to 700. Well, anything up to 700 is going to override this 500 if you have them flipped. So your order does matter here. One thing to note. Zach, that doesn't look like your cat is spazzing out. It looks like it couldn't take another hour for dinner and died.
I had to pick him up because he wouldn't stop attacking the chair.
Ah,
Or-
okay. Any questions on media queries? Does that hopefully make sense based off of the free code camp exercise from last night? Click in of when you would want to use that. I did promise. In addition, we have only screen here. There are other use cases for media types. Screen is the most common one and the one you would use all the time. The speech tag is for accessibility reasons. If a screen reader is reading out your page aloud, you may want to hide certain elements that you don't want the screen reader to read. Or if it's a more important element for the screen reader to pick up, you may want to adjust like the font size on that. I can't say I've ever used that, but that may not be a good data point. That may be something that you actually should be using more often. And then print I have used when someone goes to file print your website, and you know, like when you go to print out a recipe and the ad is like taking up the entire ingredients list, and you're like, oh, come on, I just want to print the recipe and now I can't see the ingredients. You could use this print and say, hey, for my ads, don't make it show up when the user prints out the page, or make sure the ad shows up further to the right so it's not covering things up. And then there are some weird things that you can do in here for different things you can target. I don't think I've ever targeted anything other than max width. That's not true. I have used resolution before. So what you can do is for, like, you know how we have Retina displays in our Mac and probably in most of our phones. But back in the day, when we were targeting some lower resolution screens, as high resolution screens became more common, I have used resolution to say, like, load in a lower quality version of the background image so it loads faster. That is probably less of a use case today. You can target different properties in here, height and resolution and stuff like that, but this is going to by far be the most common media query that you write.
Is that example that you just said for like the resolution, is that like the example, is another way to do it is the example that they gave us on for the homework last night? It was like responsive image or something like that.
Yes.
And how often would you use that?
With internet speeds and 5G coming out, probably not as frequently. My boss has been a software engineer or in software engineering related fields for about 30 years. And he said back when he was making his first websites, one trick that they did when he was making them for like banks, and what he would do is actually have all the images load in black and white first. And then after all the black and white images loaded in, they would go back in and reload them in color. And that's how they get websites to look good on dial-up and load reasonably fast. So, I mean, we can go way back. Like, that was before the days of CSS. CSS didn't exist in the first versions of HTML. It really depends. Like I said, 95% of the time I'm using media queries with a max width. The other 4% of the time I'm probably doing targeting the print instead of targeting the screen. When there is something in particular that I know users are going to be printing out and it isn't going to lay out well on a 8.5 by 11 printout. I can't say that I have ever used any of these other ones, but that's not to say that you can't. And I know Caitlin has reached out to me in her day job and said, like, hey, have you ever used a media query that targeted this specific thing? And I'm like, no, and I loaded this list, and I'm like, you can, right? There's a reason why all of these different targets exist. But basically the way to think about your media query is thinking about media, right? Where is this coming out? Is this coming out on a high resolution media? Is this coming out on something with a really wide screen width? Is this coming out where we need to target a screen reader for accessibility reasons? They're all different targets of media queries. But the the reason I'm sticking to my guns on this is because 95% of the media queries I have written are written with this exact line, with the exception of obviously the screen size. Okay, any final questions on media queries before we move on to our final two utilities of the night?
Yeah, one, just the syntax. So if you wanted to target screen and print, do you know how you would?
Ooh, I think you can chain this to say. That's a great question. All only, can we do screen and print? Screen and print? Nope, doesn't like that. Screen comma print? Okay, let's try that. And then let's say our color is going to be, well, let's see. If we leave that as a font size 12, and it's nice and tiny, and I say print that, it appears to keep it small. And then if I take that out and print, didn't look to be any bigger.
Because the width of your print copy is wider than your width rule.
That's probably it, yeah. So let's say 200 there. Print that size. And then print. I don't know if that made it any bigger. I can't say that I've ever combined those two, so I don't want to spend too much time on it. You could always, you know, just copy the whole block and you know, swap it out that way. That's not the driest code in terms of don't repeat yourself. But there's probably a way to do it. I just am not familiar with the syntax for it.
All right, I was just curious.
No, it was a good question, just one I unfortunately do not know the answer to. Okay, so let's move on here. I am going to... See, these outlines are just as much for me as they are for you guys. Okay, so let's move on to Flex. And for that, I'm actually going to swap over to Larry's code that I probably should have asked permission before I did. But we're going to roll with it anyway. So Larry's code as of last night. Let me go to my playground, and I called this Larry.html. No, I didn't. I called it... I didn't have it in there, so I'm going to quickly add it in there. And now I'm going to go to Larry. Okay, so this is Larry's code. I'm going to zoom out. And icons, text then. So what we ended up with here is these icons are right at the top of the page, right? And when we're looking at these, we want these icons to be centered right in the center of where that div is. So in order to make that a little bit easier to see, I'm just going to add an inline style tag here, and I'm going to say border 2px solid red. So we can see where this is, and kids is actually in the right spot, but our icons are right at the top, and we would really like them centered. And so what we could do is we could add padding onto them, but they're inline elements, right? So the padding and the margin, if they're top or bottom, they don't apply quite the same way because it's inline, right? Inline is using a different positioning system. So instead of using a block element, which is then going to be difficult to position because we do want them showing up left to right, and instead of using an inline element, which is now causing problems because we can't push the top or the margin bottom, what we want to use instead is a flex element. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to getbootstrap.com. I'm going to go to the docs, and down here over in the utilities, I'm going to scroll down until I find flex here. This, by the way, is in the outline under resources and the agenda. So if you prefer to just click on this link, you can. And what this flex is doing is it's saying flex is literally saying, we're flexible with the position of where you would like to put this. You tell us where to go, and based off of the height of the parent or the layout of the parent, we're going to move things around for you, right? So this is getting your CSS to essentially do yoga for you. So we need to find, first of all, we need to tell our CSS it's going to be doing yoga. So in order to do that, we go to where our links are, and we add a new class to it called d-flex. And that's saying, hey, this is the parent element. This is where you're going to move things around relative to this parent. So that's the d-flex that we're going to use. Before we can apply anything else, we've got to tell the browser, you need to use this different layout engine. It's not going to be inline. It's not going to be block. It's this other one called flex. And then we've got all of our different items here. So if we wanted to have things over at the end and reverse sorted, we could do that. That's not what we want. We could have it flip and go vertically. We don't want it to do that. We could have it justify the content, but we're going to come back to this one because we do want it over at the right. But what if we wanted our items to space out, right? What if we wanted the left one to be all the way on the left and the right one to be all the way on the right? Well, let's play with that. That is 1, 2, 3, 4 down. So we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4 down, and that's justify content between. So I'm going to add that after my d-flex, and you'll see now the items are all equally spaced out with space between them. Look what happens. Let's see if I can get that small enough. When I take that out, it's going to be minor, or it's not going to do anything because that's the default. Okay, never mind. Bad example. Let's try our justify content start instead. There just might not be enough space for it to flex around that. Okay, let's get to our example, which I know is going to work. So what we want is, this is all the items at the top, all the items at the bottom. This is all of our items in the center. That's what we want to be working with, right? Because we know this profile icon is kind of at the right spot, but we would like all of these to be right in the center of that profile icon. So I'm going to come down and get my align item center, copy that, and paste that into my class. And now all of our items are lining up where we want them to, right? They're all in that line. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take out our col 4 and make this a 7. And what that ended up doing is, well, we had our text end on there, right? We've got our text end, but that was working before the d-flex in the align item center, right? If I take that off, they are going over to the right. Well, this text end is now no longer working because we're not using inline elements, we're using display flex. So that text end no longer is going to work because text end only works for inlined elements. So what we need to do instead is say, okay, well, this is the vertical spacing. What about the horizontal spacing? So we're actually going to go up and say, okay, well, this is a spacing between items. That's not what we want. What we actually want is, that's direction, flexbox, maybe it's further down. Fill, auto margins, width align. Why do I feel like I missed it? Flex item. I definitely mixed it. Justify content, I think is what we want. Okay, yeah, it was. So we want everything over to the right here, right? We don't want them over to the left, which is going to be by default this justify content start. We want them all over to the right. So I'm going to take that justify content end and replace, I'm going to take out my text end because that's not working anymore, and put in my justify content end, and that's what's going to get it over to the right. And now, because we've got a bigger one, if we swap this out for justify content evenly, that should look like this one in here, and when we come over, we see that's spacing it out.
Max, would it be better to use the method we justify content right and just have 3 columns instead of that column spacer, or no?
You could. It depends when you get into your responsiveness, how you want that to be responsive, right? So that could be something that you do. You could actually make this a 3 and make this your 7, and now you've got your 8. Now you've got that over on the right, and you've got more room to have these links show up. So it really depends. It's a mix and match of how you want that to work. Now, that leads me right into my next point of, well, what if I want this to disappear on mobile? What if I want this to only display when I'm on a bigger screen size, but as soon as I hit a tiny screen, just hide that, make it go away? Well, if we go into Flex and go into our display, there are all kinds of things that you can combine here, but one of the examples is hiding elements. So what we can do is we can say, hey, if we do a D-none, it's going to display on none. If we only want it to show up on an extra small screen, we could use both the class D-none and D-small-block. Or we could say we want it visible only on extra small screens. So what we are going to do is we are going to say hidden on only extra small screens. That's this D-small-block. So we're going to come in here and we're going to add that in. Take out our period, right? Our period is just showing us that should be a class. And now here it is. And as we get down to a smaller screen, it's going to make a liar out of me. I think this needs to be D-small flex because we're combining them. Okay. D extra small. I may have to combine it with D-none. Maybe trying to combine too many things here. Okay, hidden only on extra small, D-none, D-SM flex. Hidden, there we go. Okay, so this is a little bit of a weird one. So I wonder what we had to do is say basically don't display it anywhere, but display it on small and up. But instead of using block, we have to use flex because we're using flex later on in the classes. So this is a good example, like how many classes we have on this, but they are all still working. They're still all impacting the layout and the content. But basically what we did here is we combined classes. We said don't display it anywhere, but display it on small and up as a flex item. So now when we shrink this down, it shows up until it hits that extra small screen size, and then it disappears. So this is one that you can kind of play around with and say, oh, I only want it to show up on certain screen sizes, and you can start working, combining these classes to get it to show up that way. Okay, I know that was a lot. Why don't we spend the next 8 minutes, create a little playground, make sure your bootstrap is pulled in, play around with display, play around with media queries, kind of see where we're at there. Spend the next 7 minutes coming up with any questions, and then we'll go on our break from 7 to 7:20. And go back to my outline and just make sure. Yes, I think that covered everything. Save your Netflix questions. We will be getting to Netflix after the break, and we'll be spending the rest of class on that. But if you have any questions about, do an overview, although this is all on the outline, Div Verse Span, Class Verse ID, Google Fonts, getting your Google Material icons to work, anything with media queries, anything with flex, or anything with the display properties, flex and display, both of which are coming from Bootstrap, go ahead, check out the Bootstrap documentation, read over it, make sure you understand when we would use it. And same with Flex, right? Make sure you understand why we would use Flex. Now, if you're like, okay, I see you using Flex, but I have no idea how I would use that myself, that is what Flexbox Froggy is for. And I think, Shranjay, you asked about that. That's what Flexbox Froggy is exercises where there's a leaf pad over here and a frog here, and you're trying to get them to line up. And then it gets a little bit harder, and the leaf pad goes down to the bottom. So that's exploring all the properties of Flexbox and getting you to understand them. So I always use the, when I need Flexbox, I tend to reach for the Bootstrap classes because I find them a little bit easier to work with. But if you're curious about how that's working under the hood, you can use Flex without using Bootstrap, right? Because it's built into built into CSS. So Flexbox Froggy is going to go through and give you practice with those properties. But before, the one problem that I have with Flexbox Froggy is it tends to drop you right into the properties without context. So that's why I have the free code camp exercises coming first, because then you learn a little bit about when you would use Flex. Then you can go into Flexbox Froggy, and then if you really want to get in depth, you can go to CSS Grid. Stick around for 5 minutes. If you don't have any questions or you don't want to play around, feel free to take your break. We'll be back at 7:20. I'll stick around just for a couple minutes if there are any questions about what we covered. Otherwise, I'll see you back at 7:20.
Can we see that the section where you did the icons, how you got them to move down from the top?
Yeah.
Please.
Boop. Boop. That is this deflex and then align item center and then justify content end. Shantina, did you ask to go over icons? No? Okay.
I do, well, I guess this might be a question for when we come back. The two icons that are under the little paragraph that explains what the movie is about, are those buttons?
Um,
Or were those just icons or logos that were like that?
the play and the more info, is that what you're talking about? Yeah,
Yes.
you should do those as buttons and then
Mhm.
get some practice targeting those and styling the button in your CSS to get it to look like these two.
Okay, that's what I was doing, but I wasn't sure.
Yep.
I need to go back and watch that video, our
We-
previous class on it.
We didn't get to that play. We didn't do the buttons in class. So just play around with them, see if you can get them styled right, and if you're stuck there when we do come back from break, that's definitely a good question to go over and get practice with.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. All right, I am going to swap my microphone back to yesterday's quality, so hopefully that will be fixed after the break, but otherwise I will see you guys at 7:20. Rest of the class is all about Netflix project and just working through questions there. So no more new content. If you are someone who works better in silence or works better with music on, at this point, feel free to drop out of the Zoom room and go work on the project if you want to. I am someone who can't hear someone else talking when I'm coding, so I totally get it. This is all recorded. It will all be up on YouTube if you want to catch up. With that said, if you are someone who benefits from other people's questions, there is a good chance someone else has the same question that you have. So I would encourage you to stick around, but at the same time, also acknowledge that everyone works differently, and you probably have already heard enough of my voice for a lifetime, let alone for trying to code through it. So no hard feelings if you decide to drop out. With that said, Wayne, kick us off with questions, and then I'll get to you next, Christy.
Okay, so should I share? Let me start sharing.
Yep.
All right.
And Larry, I see your hand raised. I will get to you after Christy, after Wayne.
So my first thing is, I know you said that when you reach a problem, you should
I
But
sure do.
I did because I felt like you probably could help me with that one eventually. All right, so my thing is going from top to bottom. I'm okay with this. I wonder if I can tweak these and fix these, but this and this
Okay.
too. And I need my top 10 to look more, a little bit more,
Okay.
nice.
I actually want to check to see. It is possible that Netflix has tried to. Whoa. Sorry, something went wrong on my side. Let me just see if I can go to Netflix quickly for the top 10 and see if whatever show loads for me is in the top 10. Because if it is and it's an icon, I would rather just use their image and give that to all of you guys. Let's see if I.
Yeah, because I was thinking like, how can I split the 10? I did split the 10 up at one point, and then I'm like, damn, I lost it. Literally, like the top was above the 10. I'm like, yeah, that's all I wanted. And then the number 2 TV show was closer, and I'm like, yep. And then I messed with some more codes. Just I don't know what happened.
Let me see if this is gonna work the way I think it's gonna work. Let
Need
me
to
save
change
it.
this too. Wow. This
New save.
cover. Color.
Download save. This looks like it's gonna work. Okay, so in the CIC live stream channel, I am sending a top10.svg icon. And you can use that instead of trying to get it styled right and fiddle in with your CSS. You can use that top10.svg instead.
Okay. I'll try that. Let me move this though, since it seems like it's giving me a problem. I don't like that. Bye. Save this. Oh no.
All right, go ahead and put that back. Let's take this one at a time. So where do you need the most help? Because we're probably not going to get through all of it tonight, but what bothers you the most out of all of this?
Okay, so these 2 buttons, I need to push them over, and see, my issue is this part looks okay, but why is see what's going on between the gap between here? I don't have one. I don't know why there's.
Okay, so let's start with that, because I think that may be impacting your layout. So I'm gonna request remote control. And first thing I'm gonna do is actually start in your browser and start looking at inspect to see if we can figure out what's going on there. So I'm gonna go to inspect. I'm going to come out of mobile mode, and I'm gonna just try and find that image. There it is. There's your image cover, and I think that's what you were trying to take out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete that, and now all of a sudden that fixes all of our problems, kind of.
That's what I did a while ago, and then that one got big.
So and then if we take this column out, that's going to start to line up. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go back to your code. Here's your image. Your image you shouldn't be using cover.image in an image tag. We should be using that as a background image instead. So I'm going to take out these call2s. And then the other problem that we have going on here is you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 shows trying to show up.
Yeah, right.
But these are not respecting your columns. So they are flowing out over, come on, there we go, of the column and on top of each other. So what we want to do is we're going to say, you've got your row show image here. So I'm going to go to your CSS. Maybe I'm going to go to your CSS. I'm going to go to your CSS and I'm going to add in your show image, and I'm going to target any IMGs in that ID, and I'm going to say the width shouldn't be more than 100%. So now when we come over, all of a sudden they're feeling more like a grid. Okay,
Question.
so now
Question.
our
I'm sorry.
next problem.
I'm so sorry. My question is,
Yeah.
so you have to specify that you want to target the image. Okay. All right. Okay.
Yep. So yeah, let's go over that just to make sure that we're. So I can't target just show image, because if I just target show image, I'm gonna if I just scroll over here and say right click close to the right, that should close all of them, and then we have our style.css. Okay. So what we have going on here, I don't want to just target every IMG tag, because if we target every IMG tag, then I'm going to be targeting the logo up here and other places where we're using IMG. So we don't want to target every IMG, but at the same time, we do want to target every IMG inside of this ID. So that's why we chained these two selectors together. We say, hey, go get your show image, and then go find any IMGs inside of that ID, and then make them 100%. Now you may say, well, Max, that's dumb. Why do you got to make it 100%? Because the image themselves are a certain size. And what we want the browser to do is shrink it in and say, no, we're laying you out in this column. Those column widths are changing based off of screen width. So just take this image, no matter what size it is, and make it fill up 100% of the column. And so because we have done that, now our images are feeling more like a grid. Okay. So
totally get it now. Okay. Whew.
Up next, I want to get your background image fixed.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to come back in, and your background image is applying to the whole body.
Okay.
But we don't want it in the body, right? We want it to apply to a specific section. So let's go to our index.html, and everything in here, number 2. Okay, so you have a class on that called main show. That's where we want it. But let's confirm our div is lining up. So I'm going to put my mouse on the div, and I'm going to scroll down, and all of this content should have the show image behind it.
Okay.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab your class main show. Because it's a class, I'm going to add a period and say main show. And that's where I'm going to say, hey, take all of our background info and throw it in there. And then we broke everything. Okay.
No, it's not broken. It's just that the color is white. That's why.
Okay, class main show. Do we have any other main shows?
Yeah, I think so.
No, it doesn't look like we do. These should be in quotes, I think. Okay, so let's see what's going on. I'm going to open my div class row. I think you've got the wrong file open. Because this class isn't showing up in your browser. Let me close this. Open this index. Start of main show. Where's your...
I might have deleted it.
No, well...
It's
in there.
Let's
try this. Let's stop and start the server. Maybe...
Okay, I did something wrong.
Where's your class? I don't understand where it went. It's on there. Class equals main show.
Do you think if I put it before class row, that would make sense?
Oh, that's the problem. Good catch. Okay, we can't have two class equals.
You know, I learned that the other day too. Damn it. Okay.
So we
sorry.
just need a space between them. Good catch. That took me a minute. Okay, so now when we go back, there's our image.
When you put in two classes, you don't separate them like that. You just
You just put a
yes,
space
thank you.
between them. Yep. Okay, so now all of a sudden, I don't want to say it was a train wreck before, but now all of a sudden this doesn't feel like a train wreck. This feels savable, right?
Yeah.
The other thing I would do is you don't really want to put a padding on your page. So
Okay.
what you want to use instead is a container, and that container is going to come in from Bootstrap. So you're actually already doing that, except
So just
you've
keep
got
the
the
padding
same
up?
thing going on here. You've got two classes, so these are canceling each other out.
Crap.
So I'm just going to take this one off, and I'm going to leave it here and see what, because now this is the full width, that's doing what we want. Take a stab at going through the top, identifying what the problems are, working your way from the top to the bottom, and then if you have more questions, we can come back to you and go from there.
Thank you, though.
No problem. Hopefully that gives you a little hope of I'm not that far off from where I need to be.
No, I'm not.
I figured out what I was doing wrong, so Larry can go next.
Okay, Larry, you're up.
Oh, I am.
All right.
And I swapped out my microphone during the break, so I hope you can hear me now.
Finish
I
these
can hear you.
classes.
Perfect.
Let's see.
Class, just a space between them.
Okay. So, let me get my mouse over there. So I got stuck here. I used an image for the Netflix N, and then
Okay.
I typed the word series, and I cannot figure out how to close that space between them.
Okay. Go to your index.html. And let's look at okay, so that's a col1. And then where is oh no, I'm sorry. Go down a little bit to where your Netflix N and the series are. We're in the nav bar, I realized we should be a little further down.
Here we go.
So there you go. So you've got that as a col1 and then a col11. So this may be one of those times that we are actually trying to use too many grids, and that's what's causing them not to go together. So what I want to do is let me request remote control. This is a time that we kind of just have to play around, and we may find that it's doing exactly what we want. So I'm going to take our series span and move it up right next to our image. And then I'm going to comment out this column. And I'm just playing here. I don't know that this is the answer yet. And I'm going to make it a col 12. And now, all of a sudden, our series is closer to where we want it to be.
Oh, okay. Now, when I was trying to use the inspector, I noticed that there was a lot of, I don't know if it's padding, because I couldn't tell if it was padding space or what.
Yep.
But there was,
so let's take a
space around it.
Yeah, so let me, is it going to let me zoom in? No, it's not going to let me zoom in. It's going to let me pinch in. Can you try hitting Command plus on your keyboard and see if it blows it up? Yeah, okay, so that should make it a little bit more workable. Okay, so what we need to do, I want to take out your flex and align item center and just see how that's impacting it. Okay, so it isn't really. So we must have
Now, is that the transparency stuff?
okay. Yeah, that is totally the problem. So Sometimes you can't really tell. So what I did is if I hover over this source, you see all of that padding area around it. That is the image itself that has the transparency in it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find your Netflix n.png in VS Code, and I'm going to right click on it and say show in Finder, reveal in Finder. And that's going to pop it open
On a different screen.
Yeah, if you
let's see.
could bring that over.
Let's see. Oh,
Okay, so I'm gonna pop that open before you go full screen.
okay.
Okay. Perfect. Okay, so I'm gonna pop this open, and by default, it should open it in preview. And if you could drag that window over for me.
Yep.
Okay, and now preview is gonna be our, you saw it once, you're gonna see it over and over again because it's, I think, an underrated tool on the Mac. What I can do is drag a box around the N, and then I can hit Command K or go up to Tools up at the top and drop down to Crop. And what that's going to do is it's going to cut out all of the extra area around it. Now, it may not look like it, but if we save it because it's transparent, it's really hard to tell, and go back to our browser, and now our Netflix is huge, but we got rid of the space.
Okay.
So now if we play with this and say, hey, the width shouldn't actually be 75, it should be more like 30.
Yeah, 375. Oh.
Yeah, there's a delay in typing 30px. There we go. Now we're getting the right spot. So let's try go 20 or even 10. And now you can play with it from there.
Okay. Thank you. I think that was it.
So,
and I was sitting here stressing over the font, and I don't need to. But
don't worry about the font. If you want to pull one in from Google Fonts, you can, but it's not a requirement. But that is a really good point. So when you open your file in VS Code, you see this like gray area. VS Code is actually helping you out way more than Chrome or Finder was, because it's actually trying to show you, hey, how big is the transparent area behind that Netflix N? So if anyone else went in and downloaded the Netflix N and there's a lot of transparency around it, you can go in, you can go into preview and crop it from there.
Oh, okay. That was good. You said, and that was Command K.
Command K to crop after you've drawn the rectangle around it.
All right. Thank you.
I seem to have gotten the hiccups during the break, so apologies.
Oh,
in advance.
that was another thing, Max. See how when we shrink the screen down, how all of my titles or categories bunch up on each other now?
Yep, that's pretty normal whenever you zoom in. If you hit Command 0, it's actually going to reset your zoom back to the level it should be. If you click in the browser area and then hit Command 0, now that's going to reset everything back to 100% zoom level, which is what you would see as an end user.
Okay, let me see. All right. Okay. Is there a way to stop them from bunching up on each other when because I like on the Netflix, it only goes to a certain size. They don't bunch up on each other.
Yeah, I would adjust. I think you mentioned it earlier on. Let me just pop open your nav bar here. The best solution for that is probably to not use this col3 spacer. So if I take that spacer out and just delete it, and then make this a col 7 or 8. Let's set an 8. Yeah, it's an 8. So now it's got more room to spread things out. So when I pull it over, it won't bunch until we get really tight.
Okay. But is there like I know I don't want to keep going. I don't want to take it too much time. But is there a way to stop it from even bunching up? Or
Yeah, so
yeah,
the
a min width.
yeah, what you could do is you could start hiding them if it got to a certain size, or you could make this whole thing disappear, or individual links or the whole links area disappear. I don't know. Let me pull up Netflix on my side, and see what approach they take. Yeah, so what they do is when it hits a certain size, they hide all of these links up at the top, the home, all the way through to audio subtitles, and they make it just say browse instead, and it's a drop down.
Okay.
So that's something you could do, is you could have something that only showed on medium, large, or extra large screens that has all those links, and then on extra small and small screens, make it just say browse instead.
All right, so basically that would be user media query.
Either media queries or the display classes that we just used in Bootstrap.
Okay.
Which will probably be easier than media queries, but either way, you're accomplishing the goal. So whatever you want to get more practice with is fine with me.
Okay, I had to watch the videos to figure that one out. All right, thank you.
No problem. Okay, who's up next?
Hey Max, quick question. I'm trying to get my image to spread across like the whole nav bar and then get the words into it, and I'm hitting a wall.
Okay, go ahead and share your screen. And if, by the way, if anyone feels like they need a little bit like more one-on-one help, you can definitely shoot Ariel a message or me a message, and I can move you guys into a breakout room. Not that I don't love you all equally, but if you feel like you don't want to go in front of the class, Ariel's a great option for that. You got it, Nicole. Moving you in now.
Oops, I mean to do that. I'm all over the place right now, I guess. Oh, I'm just pressing stuff, y'all. Sorry. Okay. So where am I at? Image. Okay, so it's down here. I finally got it to show up, but trying to get it across the screen.
Okay, so we actually don't want to be doing an image in the image tag.
Okay.
Because we want it to be treated like a background image.
Okay.
So what we're gonna do is go ahead and take that IMG out.
Okay.
And you can also take out that span tag.
All right. I was trying to play with it.
No, you were thinking the right way of getting the image in there. But what we need to do, take that whole line out. So the source, all of that.
All of that. Okay.
Okay. So main show is where we want it to go, right? And if we look at our mock-up, we know it's not just going in the col 5. It needs to go in that entire row.
Right.
So what we're going to do is we're going to go to our style.css.
Okay.
And we're going to add, you've got your main show in there already, and you've got your background image. So you broke the rule of if something isn't working, stop and figure out why it's not working. So because it wasn't working in your background image, you went, oh, I'll try an image tag. If it's not working, you should comment it out so we can figure out later, like, hey, why isn't this working?
Okay.
So go ahead and scroll up in the left side of your files.
No, that's not my files. Okay.
And you'll notice cover is in a folder called IMG.
Right.
So in your URL, you need to do an IMG/ and then your cover.jpg.
Okay, so IMG/.
And then save that and pop over to your, okay. So now we've got the picture showing up already.
Yep. And it's spreading across too.
Yep. So you should be able to go from there and figure out what's next, hopefully.
Okay.
So
I
now
don't
we,
know if that is broke.
yeah, so let's do a quick fix for that because we know there's going to be some margin at the top of that main show area. So go to
Okay.
your style.css and just throw in another line in there that says like margin dash top 3:300 px. And that should just give you a little more bit more. Oh, I'm sorry, padding, not margin. My bad.
You're fine. Man.
Okay, and so now
Okay.
you've got some breathing room, and your Netflix series should be pushed down towards the bottom, so you can start loading up the content that way.
Okay, and then I'm sorry that one. Oh, well, that fixed the question I was going to ask next was the end series, and it's automatically there based off of that. So, thank you.
No problem. Happy
Yeah.
to help. Good progress. Everything's looking right otherwise, right? You're following the rule of don't keep going unless it's looking right. And so I think that that's going to pay off as you keep going.
Thank you again.
No problem. Who's up next?
Is anyone speaking?
No, just silently working on code.
Oh, okay.
Though if anyone has questions, I'm here. I think you guys are all engrossed in Netflix. Hopefully you're not actually watching real Netflix and didn't switch the two tabs.
Actually, I've been stuck for a little while. And I feel like I should know these things. I just need to put aside some time to like write definitions down because I'm a rewrite person. So I'm gonna share my screen.
Sure, go for it.
And Max, I want to say your humor is not lost.
Self-deprecating humor tends to be my specialty, but I try and hit up several different genres to spice up class just a little bit.
When I saw the roll gently, I said, yeah, have me cracking up. I'm sorry.
Ariel dealt with it for an entire cohort, and her comment was, don't encourage him. Okay, where are we at, Nicole? Where are we stuck? Where do you need the most help?
I'm still in the nav bar, and I think I'm stuck is where I'm not understanding where everything's supposed to go. I don't know, my head's full. And so like right here, a div class call, it means basically that's how we're separating everything within the nav bar.
Correct.
So yeah, so like I'm trying to go down here to the next section on the list that was made. So the div class column 4.
Okay.
And in that column, I have to look at the there's like another there's an outline I was looking at, but I'm not sure what I'm doing anymore.
Okay, so we're gonna make 2 quick fixes. Let me request remote control. Okay, so you've got 2 quick fixes going on, and I think you're gonna be amazed at how quick we get that fixed. But before we do, I'm gonna see if your code is, nope, not this way. Is it on another monitor or in another space? Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Okay, and then...
Oh, you couldn't hear me.
Yeah.
So are you
no.
trying to see just my code by itself? Or?
Yep, just go back here. Okay, so this is going to be helpful. So first thing we've got going on is your text isn't white, right? And so while that seems like a minor thing, it's going to make it harder to figure out like where your code's going wrong. So let's fix that first. We're going to say, hey, you've got your nav bar going on, and so let's go to your style.css, and towards the top, we're going to add in a nav bar, and we're going to say anything in that nav bar is going to be white. So when we come back over to your code, now they're white. Now we're on the right track of getting that working. So we're going to pull this open, and first things first, I notice this image is bigger than a col1. Right? So we've got things broken there of that should be fitting inside of there. So what we need to do is we need to look at your IMG, which you've got an ID on of your MyFlix logo, and we need to say, hey, the MyFlix logo is...
That's your live link. That's the live share. My code is right here. If you
okay. Yep, okay. Let me...
You get exit out of that too.
Thanks for the heads up. Okay, let's go back here. Okay, so here's your Netflix. So we're going to add we're going to add a class here. I'm going to try and add a class here, and that class is going to say full width. We want it to be the width of the column and nothing else. So we're going to come back here. We're going to say here's my class called full width, and that is going to be a width of 100%. And we're definitely not going to spell width like that. Okay. So we're going to make sure both of those are saved. We're going to come back. And now all of a sudden our logo is falling in line. So now our next problem is, hey, these shows are bunching up, but I want to look at the structure of your HTML. You've got a col1, an opening div, and a closing div. Great. Indentation's good to go. Good work. We've got an opening div and a col4 and a closing div. And indentation is right here. All right, good. That's good progress. Now we've got our opening div, but we missed our closing div
mute
tag.
me?
Yep. Okay, you are muted. So we're gonna put our closing div tag in, and this spacer call is this column. So I'm gonna just move that in there. Now your last thing that you've got going on here is your col3 for your right icons, but it's outside of your row up here. And it should be inside the row. So I'm going to take your right icons, move them inside of here, close out your div, and tab over. And then we're just going to comment these out because we're still working on them. We're not sure what's going on with them. Now you've got too many closing divs. So that's one other one. So now your div closes this div closes this div, and then this div closes this div. So if we come back over, now your right icons are lining up where they should, and these are bunching up. So I think what we're finding over time is this spacer column is not giving us enough room for these over here. So what we decided to do, kind of as we were coding, is remove the spacer column entirely and make this take up an 8. And so now we've got all of our links there and our right icons there.
Thank you. That
Yep.
did help.
Any questions on that?
No.
Okay, cool.
Max, real quick, can you grab me and Christy a breakout room, please? I tried to do it, and I think I muted Nicole by mistake instead.
Yeah, close all, add a room, assign. You really should make this easier. Okay. Christy and Ariel, you should have the option now to go into the room. Can literally say get a room, except I'm the one who has to make the room.
I'm celebrating the victory. I found out how to add kerning between the letters. Letter
Very
spacing.
nice. Very nice.
So now my series is spread out kind of like how Netflix's series is, yes.
Nice. Yeah, there are, to this day, I've been using CSS professionally for at least a decade and going back even further than that. And to this day, I will be reading someone else's CSS code and be like, what property did they just use there? And I'll go in and be like, I had no idea that was even an option. So, I don't want, there are certain things that hopefully you get drilled in your head of margin and padding and font color and font family and all of that stuff. But there are some other CSS properties where I'm like, when did they add that? Like, I've never seen that before. So don't want you to feel like you've got to get them all memorized, but it is definitely an exploration process to learn more.
Listen, I'm a person that knows how to look up stuff that I don't know. So first I had to look up what it was called. Then I'm like, I knew it was like kerning or something. I just didn't know. Then I found it. Thank you.
I've got bad news for you. If you're not someone who isn't used to looking up stuff, you're not going to make it as a developer, because I look up stuff every single day. That is not something that goes away. And oftentimes when you think in class, how does he know that? It's because I just did it earlier that day to practice for class later. So I am not omnipotent.
Max.
Yep, go ahead.
I have a couple of things that I have. Let me see. My what do you call this? My font came in with its own padding, but it's not called padding. So when let me see. No, that's not mine.
Wow, you made great progress. Oh, just kidding.
Right. So when I have that, like it has a whole blue block around it, and I can't figure out how to, you see? So I can't figure out how to minimize because it kind of came with the font that I used.
Okay, so let's try a trick. Let me request remote control.
Okay.
This is a good time where I don't have the answer, but I'm going to use the inspect tool to see what we can do to make it work. So
Okay.
not only do we have margin bottom, right? And if we say 0, that didn't help for the same reason, right? You're saying your font has it built in and that's what's causing the problem. But sometimes we can get away with negative padding or
Okay.
negative margin. So that's our
Okay.
margin bottom, and then we should hopefully be able to get away with the same trick for, oh, you fighting me? Come on, you can do it. Single click. Sometimes it is such, screw it, we're going to do it over here instead. We're going to say margin top is going to be a negative 20 px. And did that work? Negative 20, negative 40. Is that moving it? 60? I don't know that it's... Oh, yeah, it is. Okay, I just had to hit enter. So I would try those two properties on your B2 class and see if that's going to get you where you want it to go.
Okay. And then my second question, you see how my buttons, I was able to get them on there, but now my words are not lined up with the icon. Is that flex, or is that something?
That is going to be flex, and that's going to be like a deflex align item center. Let's see. There's your button. We just have to make sure that we apply it to the right spot, right? So there's your play button, your play arrow, and the text. So I think we're going to want to do it on this here. So if we try a deflex and then align items center. Ooh.
Oh. Okay, so you did it within the class of the actual button.
Yeah, we're doing it on where the two children items that need to be aligned. So whatever the parent is that has the children item in it, that's where we want to target it.
Okay. And then the final thing was that it looks like your button was a little transparent. I didn't see a transparent button.
Yeah, so what you can do for that if you wanted to is that is a CSS property called opacity. So in the element style, we can just add an opacity of like 0.8, and that's going to make it not negative. Let's try that again. Like 0.5 is going to make it semi-transparent.
Okay, and that goes on the
button as well.
Within the CSS portion?
Yes.
Or okay.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm still shocked that a deflex and an align item center did exactly what I wanted it to. Flexbox and me are notorious for not necessarily getting along, and I'm just shocked that that worked the first time.
Thank you.
Hey, Max.
Yes.
When submitting the Netflix page, is there any shortcut for attaching every single image to the submission?
Thank you for that reminder. I totally meant to touch on that. Yes, there definitely is. Let me share my screen. In right now, I've got my MaxFlix project. Whenever this is a good trick to know just in general, if you right click on a folder or a file and hit reveal in Finder, it's gonna pop open this window. So it's just a quick way to jump into your files without having to click everything through if you've got it open. What you want to do for this submission is my Maxflix has my index.html, my CSS, my HTML, my image, my it has everything in it basically. It's what I'm trying to say. So if you right click on that and drop down to compress Maxflix, what that's going to do is it's going to make that zip file for you. And then you can upload that entire zip file as one file into Canvas. And then when I download it, I will unzip it and test it from there. So you want to make sure that you're zipping up the right folder or file. But if you compress, right click and hit compress on that, that should give you the zip and then you can use it from there.
Great, thank you. That will save a lot of time.
Very glad you asked that question because that was totally on my list. Well, it was totally meant to be on my list and was not. And I will do one final reminder. By the end of class, doesn't matter where you're at, doesn't matter if it looks like a toddler drew around with crayons and your page is a complete mess. Go ahead and upload whatever you have into assignment 20 in Canvas. And know that you're not getting graded on completeness or anything like that. That's just a checkpoint for me to understand where we're at as a class, where we need to spend more time over the next 2 days. So by 8:30, go ahead and submit whatever you have. Don't panic. Don't worry about things missing or things not being complete. That will give me a good idea of how we can spend our time tomorrow and Thursday. And then do continue to work on this. This is going to be your main homework assignment. So continue working on this through Sunday and then submit the final assignment under assignment 22.
Just a quick question. I know it might sound like a slow question, but so we're just uploading a picture of our site, not the code.
No, you should be uploading the code.
Okay.
So uploading the code, and then if you've got images going on, you should just follow the exact steps I just did with Doug to compress the file into a zip and then upload that. Let me go through that one more time. So
yeah, because I was trying to do my code when I was just listening, but I wasn't really listening.
So from your VS Code, if you right click on a folder and hit reveal in Finder, or just pop open Finder and get to it the way you normally do, what you want to do is find the folder that has your index and your image folder and whatever else in it. You're going to right click on that and hit compress. And what that's going to do is it's going to make a .zip file, and then you can upload that .zip file into Canvas as one big file instead of having to select all the individual ones, and then I'll be able to unzip it and download it and review it from there. If you want to, you can upload your individual files, but because we have so many images, uploading it as a zip file is probably going to be the easiest way to do it.
Dang, I was trying to catch you. Oh, never mind.
Go ahead, Nicole. No, go ahead.
No, I was stuck at I'm at week 3. I'm just at my Netflix folder and I was just trying to make it into a zip while I was trying to follow along.
So just right click on it and hit compress, and that's what's going to make it the zip file.
One other question about uploading things on assignments. If we go to the button that says new attempt and do it again, do we end up sending you multiple versions, or do you just get the latest?
You do send me multiple versions, but I think by default, it shows me the latest attempt, and that's what I will grade.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So you're definitely you're welcome to do multiple attempts. There's a reason I have that left on. And then if you like leave a comment on it where you say, I'm stuck on this column, I can't get this in the right spot, and then the next day you upload another attempt and you go, oh, I think I got it in the right spot, I'll go through those comments and know that you got it. But I do try and go through comments that you leave in Canvas as I'm grading and reply to them. It may take me a minute to get to them, but I do eventually, in grading, try and respond to all the comments that you leave.
Good to know. Thank you.
No problem. Larry, try stopping your screen share and restarting it. For some reason, it did not go through. There we go. That worked. And let me unmute you.
Okay.
There you go. What's up?
All right. So in my outline, let me see. I think I made a row for the end series, and then we did a column 12 inside of a div. And then inside of that column, there is the image, and then there's a span for the series. So how would I break that down in here?
I would actually refactor your code instead of refactoring your outline. So whenever we have a col 12 and we end up not needing the grid system, I would refactor that out to only be using divs and not using rows.
Okay.
So if you go back to your code.
Okay. That's on another screen. Let's see.
Now you guys are living the pain that I live of having two other monitors and the monitor that I share.
All right, share screen, desktop 2. Okay.
Okay. So what I would do is
get rid of this row right here.
I would take that row out, and it looks like you're using your top row to also get that col 4 working. So I would just take out 78 and 87 and make sure that that doesn't impact anything else.
78, 87. I know, so I'm gonna have to fix the just change the ID, and then all right.
Yeah, you can move your ID from 78 down to 79, and then everything should still apply the same.
Right. But I have some CSS on that ID, so I have to do some monkeying around with it.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. If you take the ID from 78 and put it on the div that's on 79, all of that CSS should still apply.
Okay, yeah, that was my intent. All right, and then I can change this back to a col 5 then.
Yep.
All right. Thank you.
No problem.
Hey Max, quick question. I uploaded like the top 10 picture in, and I'm having issues with my like the number 2 TV, all of that being in one line. Is there a way for me to?
Yep, go for it.
Okay. If I open you back up, I probably can share my screen. 1 second.
Okay, so you got your top 10, you've got your today. Okay, so what are you struggling on?
I'm trying to get it does say number 2 on TV shows today all in one line versus the today being on the bottom.
So I'm going to request remote control.
Okay.
And I'm going to look in your come on, you can do it, Zoom. Inspect. And come out of mobile mode and just scroll down there. And so I'm going to hover over, and here's your col 3 that you've got going on in a col 5. I don't think you meant to do that. I think you meant for your col 3. I don't know what you meant
I think I did mean to do that based off of the, hold on, I'm gonna show you. Maybe I read it wrong. I might be wrong in that. Let me move all of this. You know, I got 50 million things open at one time. So in the grid, it say Cal 3.
Okay, so what did you miss above that?
A row.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So let's fix that together before I let you
Okay.
go free. So here is your call 5, but then you've got a call inside of a call, which breaks
Gotcha.
the row, the rule of always having a row if you're doing a call in a call.
Okay.
So we're going to take that whole thing and move that in here. And now I think because we're using the image, we actually don't need either of those. But let's just see. I know the indentation is off, but let's just see what that did. I don't think that's going to do anything because we're still constrained in there. So if I do a call 12 here, not a call 1, 2, 3. There we go. Now that's up on the right spot because it's taking up the full width.
Okay.
But because we ended up using an image and we're trying to do everything in line, we don't actually need a column and a row because we're not using the grid system to space them out. We're just making them all in line. So we can actually nuke that out and nuke this out and get your indentation fixed. And now there's everything shown up the way you want.
Okay.
So that is a really good point for anyone else listening. I'm just going to switch back to your outline. We planned this initially to go in its own row with a column going on, and then when we were actually implementing it, we went, we can just inline these two. We can just use a span tag or use the image instead. So this is a good example of we planned it out to use the grid system, but when we actually went to implement it, the grid system wasn't the right thing to use there, just a standard div was.
Gotcha. So that's just eliminating us out of, okay, gotcha.
Yep. Just simplifying our code a little bit.
Thank you.
Good question. All right, 7 minutes until we hopefully have our Netflixes uploaded, even though it is just a work in progress.
Hey, Max, can you help me with mine?
Nah, kind of done.
Okay.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. Share your screen.
I'm trying to get this text to go down a line. And
ooh, I do not like your container fluids. We should have one container fluid for the whole website.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know that that's causing your problem, but we just want one container fluid that's containing the whole site.
Okay.
Okay, so that did not fix. We're breaking the rule of rows never go with inside rows and columns never go with inside columns, but columns can go inside of rows, which can go inside of columns, which can go inside of other rows. So where do we want BoJack Horseman to be under the Netflix series, right?
Yeah.
So what we actually want to do is take, let me request remote control. What we want to do is end out this row because the series is already done. So the series is the last thing inside of that row. And then this row is actually going to be the next row that we're dealing with. So if we save and refresh. Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, I see what's going on here. Okay, so what we want to do, Netflix is your call 2. So let me just see. I think we're going to run into headaches of, let me see where this call 2 is. Drag this down. Drag this down. That's what I wanted to do. Okay. So your col 2 is only that wide, right? So if we go look at our mockup, we've got some description text that also needs to be in there, but it's not in a col 2, it's in a col 5. So if we look at, this isn't the outline version, but this is fine. If we look at our grid outline, what we've got going on here is we've got a col 5 for all the show info, and then we did just a div for the Netflix series. And so the reason why we did a col 5 here is because if you look at the mockup, this takes up almost half the screen. So this column that we're going to create is that all of that, and then the only thing outside of that is going to be the rating over on the right. So what we want to do is we want to make this a col 5, and then we want to have your div coming in. This is going to be one division of your site that's going to end down here. And then we're going to have another div, and that's going to be your BoJack Horseman, and we're just going to take that class off. And that is going to break your site in weird ways. Or not. That's actually closer to what we want.
Cool.
So does that make sense of like we've got our big column that's containing all the individual things, and then we're just using divs unless we need the grid system inside of it, and then we're going to use the rows.
Yeah.
Cool.
Hey, Max.
Yep.
If Christy is back, oh, apparently she's still in her room. She needs assistance going over the same spot. We had a little bit of a cycle of me looking at it versus what she had and trying to like, I confused us all. So I said, let's just go.
You confuse us?
Never,
No,
never. I aerialed it.
no.
So I'm going to need you to take a look for me, and I'm going to sit and patiently watch so that I also grasp it. Because that's the point of me doing this again, is that I can help all of you. So.
I closed the room, but I think we're just waiting on it to time out for her, and then it will dump her back in here.
I'm here. I'm just in the dark.
Oh, okay. You're pulling a common space on us where we're waving our hands and it's still not turning the lights back on.
Okay, so here, share my screen. So I am at here trying to, let me show you my, so this isn't working, but what I was trying to do is make the container on top of the background.
Okay, so first things first, let me take control.
Okay.
So I want to get us hit OK just so I can. Okay, perfect. I'm going to take us out of mobile responsive mode, which is the icon down here, just so we can get a better idea of what's going on. Okay. So what you've got your image in great, you've got your row in great. This is all looking fantastic. You're making really good progress. So now we want to focus on our Netflix series, right? And we're trying to get that up here. So let's look at your code. And here are all of your beautiful shows and your calls, and all of that's working great. Now, you did your cover image, but you did it as an IMG tag, and we don't want to do that. We want to do it as a background so that when the content gets added, the background image sizes appropriately, right?
Okay.
So what we're going to do, we've got your div for your featured container, but your div here is actually closing out here.
Right.
So your indentation.
Yeah, wait, I deleted some stuff when I was talking to Ariel, so there's some.
Okay. Awesome. So I'm gonna take this out.
Okay.
I would really like to get our indentation fixed before we go any further. So
I think it's all within that row, that background area, because that was the only place I touched.
I
So
think let's just see. I think you've got extra divs maybe down at the bottom here.
yeah, because I deleted stuff
Okay.
in the back up there, right
Okay.
here.
Okay, so now we got our indentation right. Prettier, we've got a checkbox down here, which means our
Okay.
indentation is correct. So let's
Okay.
just see. That shouldn't have impacted anything here. It didn't. Okay, so we're going to go to where our image is. And this
Okay.
is what we want to use CSS for as a background image instead of the image itself. So
Okay.
I'm going to take this out. And
Okay.
instead of calling this ID of a background, we want to be careful because we're still in the navbar div.
Right.
We don't want to be there, right? So
Okay.
what we're going to do is we're going to take this out entirely and move down to here. So
Okay.
this is going to be a div. We're going to call this the ID, and we're going to call it maybe featured.
Okay.
And then we're just going to say each one test, and just to make
Okay.
sure that we're in the right spot. So our nav bar's done. We don't have anything going on up there, and our test is in the right spot now.
Okay.
So from there, what we can do is say we're going to use that div ID feature to go to our style. We're going to
Okay.
use the hashtag because it's an ID, and we're going to say, hey, the background image is going to be a URL in
Okay.
the image folder called cover.jpg.
And I saw you do that. And that's why I said I needed to fix it, but here we
Okay,
are.
so now here we are. It's showing up over... Okay, it's just going to not respond to my clicks anymore. We can see the image, but we only see a tiny little bit of the image.
Uh-huh.
So what we need to do is we need to say, well, if we look at the mock-up, there's room up at the top of it for breathing room, right?
Right.
So what we need to do...
Padding.
Now it's all of a sudden responding to me again. Okay, we are going to add, yep, you got it, padding to the top, and let's do 300 just to get started.
Oh,
And now the
okay.
image is showing up, and now we can do a little padding maybe on the bottom of 100.
Okay.
And now you should, because we've got our HTML figured out here of, okay,
yes.
it's outside of the nav bar, but it's
Okay.
before we dive into the images with all the shows down at the bottom. So
Okay.
now you should be able to work in here, take out your test, and start building out that content.
So that in series is should be in the H1 or no?
It shouldn't be in the H1. You're going to clear out the H1, but it should be in the div ID featured.
Okay.
So what you're going to end up doing is creating several divs in here for each
Right.
row that goes
Row.
inside.
And each one of the rows inside of there, is the 12 across, or am I working with it? I'm not in a container, right? To start to know
You're not in a row yet. So if you are going to use columns, you need to create a new row inside
Row.
of here.
Right, and then that'll be based off of 12.
Correct.
Okay. Okay.
So what I think we ended up doing is what we did is we said, hey, we're going to start a row in here. Then this is just going to get you started.
Row.
And then that row is going to be in a 5. Because we want all of our content to take up almost half of the screen. So we're going to move our
Okay.
test inside of there. And then what we said is that there's going to be a spacer, which is going to be another 5.
Oh yeah, because we need 2 for that thing on the other side.
You got it. And then our last one is going to be our div class call
Yeah.
2.
2.
And Max can't type because it's this late at night. And then we're going to say like rating goes over there. And so that should set you up for our rating coming in here and our test content being over here.
And it does. Okay. Ariel, did you? Thank you.
I was watching. I feel bad. I spun you just as much circles as you came in with. No, I was watching. That makes way more sense.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
No problem. You're close. Now you're at the point where those rows are already in, right? So you can just copy and paste the show images and just change your show numbers and all of that, and that should work fine. And then it's just a matter of getting the background image showing up right and that last section loaded in.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem. Larry, you are up. Hold on, you need to unmute.
All right.
There you go.
I don't know if I'm being too picky about this, but do you see how the N doesn't line up with the B?
Yeah, so I would either do negative margin on the B, negative margin left, or positive margin on the N.
Okay. I see. I should have tried that because I thought that was probably the fix. I should have believed in myself. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, I would say it's more important to line up with the MyFlix because that's probably what's furthest over to the left. So if the N series is too far to the left, just add some margin on that or negative margin to get the Bridgerton over. But it's those little things sometimes of like, there's just transparency in the image or something's not in the container. And that's where margin is going to be your friend just to nudge it over a couple pixels.
Thank you.
But you are in the what we call the pixel perfect design phase. And that's totally not in a bad spot to be. I work with a front-end developer on my team, and I've tried to do the pixel perfect for them because their mock-ups are beautiful and everything's lining up, and I try and do it, and I hand it over to them, and they go, no, you did this wrong. And so we've just gotten to the point where I get all the functionality working and I hand it over to them and they make it look as beautiful as their mock-ups. But the mock-up is what I shoot for and then hand it over to them and go, I'm not the right person to do pixel perfect.
All right. Thank you.
No problem. Last call for any questions tonight. I know we're already a couple minutes over.
Yes,
Please.
Max, something real silly.
Yep.
Trying to get a transparent picture from Google. How do you click to make it transparent versus like typing in a transparent? Because I want to make sure that it is actually that.
Good question. Share your screen.
Okay.
Or I can share mine if it's easier.
Oh, that's fine.
So what you want to do is go to images.
Okay.
Then click on tools. And then the color, you would think it's type, but it's actually color, and then drop down to transparent. And now anything that you see in here is actually going to be transparent.
Thank you.
Now, I would say just be careful. One last thing, and let me turn on annotate mode. You see how this doesn't have a ton of room on the side of it? That means you're not going to have to crop it. But because this has a ton of room, that means that when you pull that in, you're going to have all of that space on the left and right of your image once it gets into your HTML. So picking something like this one or this one is going to be better than picking one like this, because this one you're going to have to crop over on the right.
Okay, I'm going to choose that one exactly.
Rob, do you mean like literally?
Yes.
Or is it a way? Okay.
Yeah, popping it open in preview and, drawing a box around it and cropping it out. Because even though it's transparent, that transparency is taking up space. And so it's going to be harder to get your content in the right spot because it's transparent in areas.
So where you go?
Yeah.
Little question is trying to get this little white space out and this one.
Okay. Let's see your code. I'm going to start. Hopefully we can get it out of the navbar one, and then you can take that same approach. Let me request remote control. And we're going to go up and... So you started your container fluid.
And closed it.
And you did your row and all of the top nav stuff, but then it closes down here. So what we really want to do is take our container fluid and we're going to add that here. No. you just not work for me? You're not going to copy and paste in. Okay, I'll do it the long way. Class, container, fluid, and that really should be spanning your entire site. So all the way down here, we're going to add that. And that's going to indent everything over. But that's going to make your grid system, when you're in your rows, not get mad. So we come over here, and now I think we've made it even worse. So let's take a look at what's going on your top nav and anything on your row. So let's start at top nav. And your top nav, this is empty, so I'm going to clear this one out. That's not affecting anything. Overflow, hidden, font size. Okay, here's some margin that's causing problems. So let's take that out. Okay, we're on the right track. Now you've got some background green, and that's actually padding that's built into the container, right? Because you don't actually want things all the way over to the side. So if we just take that background color, and instead of making it green, just make it black. Now we're feeling better.
Perfect.
And that also fixed some of the issues down here, so you should be able to go from there.
Thank you.
No problem. Last call for questions. Go once, go twice. Okay, bye. Just kidding.
Oh, one more question.
Fine.
One more.
Yep.
Okay. I still need a. So when I inspect this,
You got to share your
button-
screen again. Sorry, I stopped it on you.
Oh crap! 1 second. So when I inspect this button right here, I don't know why the inspector shortcut won't work for me, but okay. See this space over here?
Yeah, we got something going on with your call is at the wrong level. So let me remote control again. And let's look at I'm actually going to go back. Oh. Let me try. There we go. All right, so let's look. Your index, you've got your nav bar, all of that's fine. Your row main show. Now, all of your show info is supposed to be inside this col 5. Because this col 5 is containing, it should be containing the Netflix series, the Bridgerton, the top 10, the number 2 in shows, this part, and then the play buttons, and then the ratings and the restart should be in another column over here.
Oh.
So what we're going to do is we're going to try and take all of this stuff and move it. Whoa. Okay. This is going to be, let's try and go slow. Okay. We're going to take all of this and move it into your col 5. And see what that did. Hopefully not too much. Okay, so that doesn't look like it changed anything. But now that we've got all of that inside of it, we can go find these. This is not actually supposed to be in its own row. It's supposed to be in this row up here. So this actually, we need our spacer column, which is going to be another col 5. And then in here, all of this is actually supposed to be in a col 2.
I had those. I had those somewhere. What happened to them?
Oh, you know what? I'm
still-
sorry. I screwed that up. I'm wrong. This, let me undo. This is supposed to be in here as well. And now you have your 5 in your 2. So let's see what that does. Okay. So now these are all the way up at the top, but they're at least at the right spacing, right? They're all the way over to the right. So you can play with getting those right. But now this is all the right size and in the right layout spot, and this is in the right layout spot. So now it's just a matter of getting your padding and margin adjusted.
Thank you.
Does that make sense as to why we did the 5, and the 2?
Yeah.
Okay. Because sometimes it's hard to look at all of this and realize that all of this is in one column. But when you look at the layout, it's like, oh, all of this is taking up to 40% of the screen, and then that space is empty, and then the rest of it is over on the right.
Understood. Thank you.
No problem. Nicole, did you have
Good night, everybody.
Christy, go ahead, or Nicole, whoever gets first to unmute.
Is okay, so I tried to, let me show you. I tried to, I'm not gonna let this in stress me out, but I tried to do this in and it didn't work. Is
Okay.
there a way to make the in large and bold and red without having to do the image within a span?
Yeah, we could. It's not going to look just like the Netflix end, but let me show you how to do that. So, what we're going to do is go back to your code for me. Yeah, so instead of using this PNG, we're going to just do...
Oh, that's not it. That's not it. That wasn't it. Right here.
Here, okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to make another div for this because it's its own kind of little row. And we're going to say span and just put an N in it. And then say we're going to call this an ID called the red N. Sounds like a good show name. Okay, and then red N. And let's say that's going to be a color of obviously red. And it's going to be a font size of maybe 16px. And it's going to, let's try even bigger. Let's go like 32. And then we're going to say like a font weight of 900 to make it super bold.
Okay.
And then, I mean, that gets us to that end. Is that close enough for you?
Yes.
Okay.
Because I didn't feel like fooling with that picture. Okay, thank you.
No problem. Yeah, there are times that we work with logos and it's like we can recreate most of it, but there are also other times where you're like, okay, I just...
Not tonight.
Reminder for anyone who's still on, submit whatever you've got. Doesn't matter what it looks like. If you don't have it submitted by tomorrow morning, I will personally, Liam Neeson, hunt you down and make sure you get it uploaded. Doesn't matter how ugly it is, just get it uploaded. All right, final call for questions. Awesome. I will see you guys tomorrow.